So this is part one of the Lean Startup. We're going to start right with chapter one. In chapter one, Eric uses the metaphor of the engine of growth with Henry Ford's combustible engine. He says it's just like a startup. He had to tinker with it in the beginning to make sure that everything was right and that it would work. There was a lot of failure at first, but through Henry Ford's different ways of pivoting through that tinkering, he was able to come up with the combustible engine, which in turn allowed people to have the first cars. So he says that you have to tinker with the product, marketing, and operations, kind of like he tinkered with the engine. And that a startup is just like driving. You need the metaphor is that when you're driving, you're steering the steering wheel to go in the direction that you want to go. With the startup, that is the same as pivoting. You need to change the direction if the product or the service is not going in the right direction. It's all about finding what the customer actually wants and what the customer actually needs, not what they necessarily say they need. Constantly in control of steering your way to success, knowing when to do the pivoting is essential. A lot of entrepreneurs say that if they have pivoted, that they wish that they had done it sooner. And he states that entrepreneurship is management. And that's it for chapter one. Moving on to chapter 2 now. Chapter 2 is defined. A lean startup answers the questions of once a team is set with what it should do, what processes should it use, how should it be held accountable. These are all the questions that the lean startup answers throughout the book. A startup is defined as a human institution designed to create a new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty. The key there is the extreme uncertainty. A lot of people will start, say, a franchise, and they're brand new to the business. They don't know what they're getting into, but the franchise has this business model already set in place. It's not an actual startup because people who are loaning you money or investing in you, they have an idea of how that business model is going to be ran and potential profits within the area based off of all the other franchises. An actual startup is brand new. It's fresh. You don't necessarily know if it's going to attract the customer base. That's what a startup is used for. It's used to find that out. So a startup is greater than the sum of its parts. It is an acutely human enterprise. And they use the terms product and innovation as broad as possible. You don't want to narrow that at all. You want to make sure that as you're going through this process that you keep such a broad mind that new ideas are still coming in. You're not just focused on the one aspect of your product. You want to be able to pivot at any moment and go where something else may lead you. You don't want to stay tunnel visioned on that one product because that's how many of them fail if it's not going to be accepted by the public. So now we're moving on to chapter 3. Chapter 3 is learn. And this is where Eric goes back to MIVU's story. The need to learn what the customer wants, not what they say they want or what they think they should want. And this goes all back to the IMVU story. And he speaks on validated learning, which is a rigorous method for demonstrating progress by discovering valuable truths about the startup's present and future business prospects. And he speaks on learning how to eliminate waste through lean thinking. So lean thinking is defined as a value as providing benefit to the customer, and anything else besides that benefit is the waste that you want to try and eliminate. The lean startup is a principled approach to new product development. So anything that has to deal with a new product or even a new service, this lean startup book is a good starting point for any entrepreneur to read. It will greatly help them get out of that mindset, especially if they're a brand new entrepreneur that's trying this for the first time. A lot of them have that, brilliant idea that they just want to take and run with because they think it's the perfect thing for the customer, and sometimes they have a fogged vision on that, and they need to come back down to earth and really find out if that's really what the customer is going to want and need. As we move on here, we get into chapter 4, which is the experiment. With the experiment chapter, this is where Eric brings in the scientific method and uses the scientific method within business. One of the most important lessons is if you cannot fail, you cannot learn. Anybody who's taken a science class in 6th, 7th, 8th grade will understand that you can't really find the conclusion unless you fail and figure out the problem. That's the same thing that Eric speaks about in business. The value hypothesis is to test whether a product or service really delivers value to the customer once using it. You can see this reiteration of what the customer actually wants, what the customer actually needs. They could say they want something. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's what the general population is going to want. What one person wants isn't what everyone wants. So you need to find out your customer base, your market, what they actually want. Where are you going to bring this product, and what are they going to use it for, and what is the need? Getting into the growth hypothesis, this actually tests how new customers will discover a product or service. Eric speaks, I'm not positive what chapter, but Eric speaks on when he was trying to start up that business with the avatars and the IM messaging. When they started to bring people in and say, okay, invite your friends, people were skeptical. They didn't want to invite their friends. They didn't know if the new avatar IM was cool or not. They didn't want to invite their friends and look stupid if they were wrong and it wasn't cool. So you need to really figure out how customers are going to find out about it, how customers are going to get into your product or service. Without them finding out about the product or service, it's never going to launch. It's never going to get off the ground. And you need to answer these 4 questions. Question 1 is, do consumers recognize that they have the problem you're trying to solve? Question 2, if there was a solution, would they buy it? Question 3, would they buy it from us? Going back to that avatar IM, a lot of people were already in the market for IM through AOL, Microsoft, and some of the larger companies. Adding an avatar didn't really appeal to them when they were asked, hey, do you want to invite your friends? They still didn't know. They didn't know if they wanted to purchase it, if they wanted to buy it. They were content with what they had already, where all their friends were currently using. They didn't want to go out of their way and ask their friends, hey, come over here, check this out, when they already had something that satisfied them and satisfied that need. And the last question is, can we build a solution for that problem? So I think going back to that I am avatar, there was never really a real problem. They were just trying to get into a market that was already saturated, and that was their problem, which they found out once they continued to fail, even with all the bug fixes and added on features, it still never was able to launch. And Eric also defined success. He says that success is not defined, or success is defined not as delivering a feature, but instead is learning how to solve the customer's problem. And basically, Chapter 4 explains that you need to test your hypothesis and retest it to see if there is an actual need. This goes back to the driving metaphor in Chapter 1 with Ford's automobile and the combustible engine.